Okay, so the Batman. Let's talk about it. First, the first half of this, well, first hopefully 20 minutes of this is going to be me discussing the movie in a review format that's non-spoiler. With Spider-Man, I didn't give it any rating. With this one, I probably will, just because. Well, I'll talk about it. I'll talk about why I'm probably gonna give this one a rating versus Spider-Man. Spider-Man, I felt was a lot different than this movie for multiple reasons, and I think everyone kind of expected that going into this. I love both movies, so spoiler alert: I love this movie. This movie's amazing. But yeah, non-spoilerly review to start out with. Going into this, if you really like, well, okay, let me rephrase. I would describe this movie as having the skeleton of Telltale Batman. So Telltale's Batman, from the Telltale games, the ones where you can choose your own path. If you don't know where that's from, you should play the game, get a little bit of an idea, or at least watch a playthrough or something to kind of get an understanding of how that Batman works and how that Gotham and its characters work. So it has like the skeleton of that, but the flesh and meat and like the rest of the body is all like Batman the Animated Series. I was trying to find a different way to explain this, but I think that's kind of what I came to on the ride here, ride back home, is it's very much the structural, the thing that makes it up, I feel like feels like Telltale's Batman, like its characters and how they're human and grounded in a way that, I guess grounded is maybe the wrong word, because I feel like this movie is less grounded than Christopher Nolan's Batman, while also being more realistic than Christopher Nolan's Batman in terms of their characters. I feel like that also has to do with the length of this movie. This movie is very, very long. It's 3 hours, which going into this, I knew that, and it made me think, oh, it's going to be like Endgame. Kind of, sort of, but not really. I feel like Endgame versus this, they're doing the same thing where they don't split the movie, but they have parts in the movie, phases in the movie, if you will, where you're kind of going from one end to the other end to the next part to the next part. And then by the conclusion, it feels like you're solving a whole different problem than what you did in the middle of the movie, which sounds kind of weird when you usually think of storytelling having, a beginning, a rising action, a climax, and all that stuff. This doesn't pertain to that because I feel like it's a very long movie. Endgame's the same way. But yeah, this movie, their characters feel more realistic while also having a lot of theatrical parts, mainly for Batman. Batman himself, especially in the beginning of the movie, is very Batman the Animated Series, but kind of also Arkham games. I'd say the beginning is it's very Arkham. Like if you play the Arkham games, it's just like that. The beginning, like the introduction to Batman and Gotham, actually looks just like if you've played Arkham Knight. I didn't expect it because if you've seen the trailer, and if you haven't, that's fine. I'm not gonna tell you if you're like someone who's like, no, don't give me specifics on the scenes. I'm not giving you specifics. It's just I looked at the trailer and I thought Gotham looked very gothic, grounded, boring. Maybe is the right word that I was going for. Not that it would have been bad if they hadn't shown me anything else from Gotham, but I just felt like Gotham was kind of out of touch with what I would have expected from a Gotham nowadays. But when the movie starts and you get an introduction to Batman and you get a very Arkham, Arkham Knight feel, you see the rest of Gotham and he's in different parts handling different problems, right? There's also you know what? I'll save that for the spoiler part. But yeah, overall, the beginning feels very Arkham, and then going from there, there's different phases to this movie. Like I said, How do I put it? They kind of explore each section. Each section has a good purpose for it. I would still say Riddler is the main villain. He overarches throughout all of it, kinda. There's parts where it's very much Bruce and Batman coming to terms with themselves, psychologically. I wouldn't say that all has to do with Riddler, although Riddler does technically pull the strings for everything. So, without going into spoiler territory, I'd probably say it's very much not all Riddler, not all one villain, not all Catwoman's there, not all Penguin's there, which is another thing. There's a lot of villains in this movie. I mean, there's three Rose Gallery villains that we can say are super villains. There's three super villains, but I would say if you asked me, I don't think this is a spoiler. And I'm not saying like, oh, it's someone huge. It's not someone big, and I'm not gonna spoil anything. It's just I would say there's probably four villains in this movie instead of three. Yes, Penguin, Catwoman, and Riddler are there, but there's kind of a fourth villain that does his part, and I feel is more for Bruce than it is for Batman. Not that it isn't for Batman, but I feel like he has a part to play with the other three too. I'm not gonna say who it is, even though I don't think. Yeah, I'm not gonna say who it is. But when you watch the movie, you'll understand what I mean. Overall, the shots and the fighting were really interesting. I think the fighting, there's parts where the movie, for being so long, I could feel how long it was. Not that it was bad, but it's because there was parts where I got something that I didn't have for a while in the movie that I then realized, oh wow, like it brought it back, and I was like, oh, one example is fighting. Not that there's not a lot of fighting, there's a lot of fighting, but there's a mix, and there's points where, because of how long the movie was, and I don't know if this is something that I would take away from the movie or add to the movie. I didn't really get bothered by it, but I'd be interested to see how other people felt about it. There's parts in the movie where, let's say for the fight example, there's like, oh, I haven't actually seen a fight in a while, and I don't think that until a fight happens again with Batman. I'm thinking, oh, I was missing this for a bit, and I don't know, and that goes for other things too. Like, let's say, I don't know, hard to say. I mean, I can't think anything else, but the fight, it did, like Riddler, for example. I feel like Riddler's you take a break from Riddler, and then Riddler comes back, you're like, oh, right. I forgot about that. Not saying, this makes it sound bad, but it's just because the movie is very long, and like I said, it does this, kind of does phases, so it feels very, you don't realize how much you're losing, or how much, not losing, but how much, you weren't experiencing the other thing. And that's where like shots come into play, because there's some interesting shots. I don't know if it's not really spoilers. There's some first person viewpoints. If you haven't seen the trailers at all, there is one in a trailer. So I feel like if you have seen the trailers, you know what I'm talking about. It's the first one. I think it's done again in the second one, but yeah, I won't say what the scene is, but it's not a huge deal. It's just you get some first person shots, and that's not the only shot that's first person in the movie. So it's kind of a while, but then they do it again. It's subtle. It's not for any like, any huge impact. It just kind of, it's an interesting move. It's a really interesting move, I feel like, filmmaking wise, because you have a different form of immersion. I didn't think, and that's something that I will kind of like, and I don't know of how much they're gonna carry on with that kind of stuff. I hope the cast is mostly the same, and I mean, I don't mean the actors and the director. I mean like the whole cast. Like, I mean, the director Matt Reeves is doing a great job. So he's doing the other two movies. They're doing a trilogy. It's great. I just don't know, if that was all Matt Reeves' idea. I mean, he's the director, so I imagine it was. But whoever, Matt Reeves isn't the only one that does like stuff. The director's not the only one that's responsible for the shots. Like he shapes the movie in his image, or she shapes the movie in their image, but it's still kind of something, like techniques are different, I don't know. And also equipment is different too. I'd just like to see this again with a different film, a different Batman film, like a next one coming up. So I don't know. I just really liked it. I found it really interesting, and it's different. The shots and the choices were really different, and I really appreciated it for that, because I think as a movie as a whole, I came into it and I was like, oh wow, this is really good, because it made me. I'm not gonna lie, I smiled a lot in this movie, which is funny because I feel like my emotions here and my emotions with what I was expecting, I was thinking like I'm going to be really. I don't know. I don't know what I was expecting, but I smiled a lot in this movie. And surprisingly, I laughed once or twice. Not that this had any humor in it. It's just, well, it did have humor. It had some jokes here and there, but not from, well, well, I guess maybe from Batman. It depends on how you, but in a very Batman way, not in like oh, I'm trying to make a joke. And I feel like with Bruce, it's a really interesting it's a really interesting Bruce Wayne, because I think and again, if you haven't seen the trailer, it's not a big deal. I'm just mentioning this if you have seen the trailer and what you can take away from it, and kind of what you see in the movie versus from there in different parts. But Bruce, a lot of people came into the movie, at least from the trailers and everything, saying that Bruce Wayne doesn't seem like Bruce Wayne, or at least, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist Bruce Wayne. And this comment of Bruce is going to lead to my comment on Batman, and kind of what this means for both, and I feel like how this trilogy is going to treat them. Bruce doesn't act like Bruce Wayne almost at all at the beginning of the film. Like, he acts like the guy who is Batman. He doesn't really act like Bruce Wayne, at least the way we know it. And that kind of makes sense. That makes sense, because the theme of the movie kind of, it eventually leads Bruce to needing to be like the Bruce Wayne we know, and kind of starting to get less carried away about being the Batman. Not that he still doesn't treat Batman seriously, he does. It's just, that's why I'm saying this leads to my comment on Batman. So that's my comment on Bruce Wayne, is that at the beginning you don't really get Bruce Wayne. You do, obviously, but you get a guy who is Batman. That kind of gradually changes to Bruce Wayne and Batman. Batman, on the other hand, becomes at the beginning, it's Batman. It is Batman. So when I said Arkham Batman is exactly probably what you get. Whatever you think of Arkham Batman, that's the Batman you get at the beginning. By the end of it, and it's not like halfway through the film. It's probably, I'd say, the last. Well, maybe I won't be too specific, but it's the very last bit almost, where you have a different Batman than what you started with, which probably you could say is good filmmaking, right? Because, well, it's good storytelling, because that means your character developed, which is good. But yeah, I think that is mostly because the conversation that always happens of like, well, okay, I don't kill, I want to be better than the people I put into Arkham, and then people being like, yeah, but you're a guy in a bat suit who seems just as crazy. That argument kind of gets thrown at Bruce, which is interesting. I like that it happens, but yeah, so it changes Batman a little bit, I won't say how they do it, obviously, but it's interesting. It changes Batman, and it changes. We don't see how it changes Bruce. I'm just gonna say that much. Bruce slowly tries, like, has hints, but we get a lot of Batman in this movie, and that makes sense. It's the Batman, so I'm glad about that. I'm not like, oh, I want more Bruce Wayne. I feel like Christian Bale gave us way too much Bruce Wayne. I think he gave us way more Bruce Wayne than Batman in those movies, and I realized that watching this movie, because watching this movie I felt like I was reading the Batman comics, and I was like, I wonder why I feel like that. I was like, oh right, because this feels more like I'm watching Batman than Bruce Wayne. And I feel like that's something that Matt Reeves is smart to not play by, the handbook that was given to him previously. Like, oh, there's a lot of Bruce Wayne, or maybe 50% is Bruce Wayne, 50% is Batman. Matt Reeves, being a guy that has read a lot of Batman, knows that's not how Batman works. All right, you get 20% Bruce Wayne, if that, and the rest is Batman. Like, that's just it. You don't get much of a guy. You get a guy who's also a superhero. There's a slight difference, but it's a pretty major one. But yeah, I think the last thing I talk about in terms of non-spoilery stuff is probably the villains. Catwoman is fun. I like their dynamic, Catwoman and Batman, and Bruce. Kind of, like I said, there's not much Bruce in the movie, but I like the dynamic between Batman and Selina. It's interesting. It kind of makes me, like, when I say Bruce isn't very much Bruce in the movie at all in the beginning, it's kind of also apparent in terms of how he acts with Selina. He's, at least as Batman, he's what you'd expect. As Bruce Wayne, it's different, and I kind of find it fun. It makes you realize Bruce is not a very sociable person, which makes sense considering his upbringing. But yeah, no, he's not good with this kind of stuff at all. It's a nice change of pace, but yeah, it's interesting. I just like what Bruce Wayne feels about Selina and how that's shown. It's interesting. Cobblepot is like Penguin. He's fun. He's where a lot of the comedy comes from. I think there is some comedy from Penguin, but there's also some comedy in how Catwoman and Batman interact. And then Riddler is kind of the theme of the movie, of like, he causes Batman and Bruce to both change their ways and act more different than how they started in the film. So yeah, and there's also, like I said, a fourth villain. I'm not going to talk about him too much, but he also does a little bit more for Bruce Wayne than he does for Batman, but there's some parts there. I think that might be it. I'm trying to remember if there was anything else I wanted to talk about before I leave off the non-spoiler review. There was some interesting tech that was used. We got to see a lot of different Batman moments. Gordon and Batman have a fun relationship. I think it's one of my favorite ones that I've seen now. It's good. I like it. I don't know what to compare it to. I just like it. I think it works for what they gave us. And yeah, the rest of the normal people and how they treat Batman is about what you'd expect. They're freaked out. They think he's weird. But, what are you going to do? Man, I feel like there was something I wanted to say, but I can't remember it. Oh, it's going to kill me if I can't remember it, though. Shoot. Damn. What was it? Alfred. Alfred was Alfred. Alfred was Alfred. He has kind of the dynamic that you'd expect with Alfred and Batman, so that's all good. That's what I wanted to say. I remember now. See, stalling helps. There's a really, and when I say comedy, this is probably the scene that I don't think some people would, I don't think everyone would laugh at it, but I found it very funny. And okay, I'll say this. The joke, so if you guys have ever heard the term comedy comes in threes, it's this joke. The joke is like that. It happens 3 times. It involves a door, and that's all I'll say. It's so funny. The first time it's funny. The second time it's not as funny. It's not supposed to be funny, but I found it really funny considering what changed. And then the third time is funny. So yeah, if you watch the movie, you know what I mean. I just wanted to leave it off with that. That was the last thing I wanted to say. But yeah, that scene, all the three times it happened, killed me. It was so fun. I loved it. It just felt. I want to know how far apart each of them were because I feel like it happened beginning, middle, and end, or like semi end. But yeah, it happens three times. It involves a door. It's really funny. I love the scene. But yeah, I think that I'm gonna leave it at that for the non-spoiler review part of the movie. Anything that I've said prior regarding the plot and the story is gonna carry over to the spoiler part. So I'm not repeating myself, and I make this really really long for no reason. But I'm gonna leave you guys off with that. With the rating of this movie, I think all things considered it's a long movie, guys. It's a long movie. I didn't need to be that long. I think somewhat, considering how many villains there were, would I want to do this again? As in, have another movie that's this long but have that many villains? Because I feel like if you made the movie shorter, some of the villains fall short. I'm gonna say no. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm gonna say yes. I'm willing to have this happen again. Like, it's fun. It's good. It kept me in. It kept me interested. I was gonna say it kept me entertained, but it kept me interested. Not all parts of this movie hit me the best, but they were okay. They were good. I think overall this movie was amazing though. From the shots, the fighting, the immersion in terms of what it does for Batman, and it does a really good job of that. I think with all the different all the different cinematic tools they used to create a good Batman movie, and giving it time to breathe and let me get used to the world of Gotham. Because I tell you what, I feel like I'm more connected with this Gotham than I am with any other Gotham. That was one other thing, is that Batman and Gotham feel like they're together for the first time in a movie. I genuinely feel like this Batman is the most connected to its city than any other Batman. That includes the Michael Keaton Batman and all the ones after that. I feel like this Batman almost sometimes felt like he was a part of Gotham, and that's pretty comic book accurate, if anything. It felt pretty good. Especially there was an end tagline from Catwoman. Selena made a little remark that I felt like I definitely smirked when she said it, but it made sense. And it made me realize at that point, I was like, yeah, you know what? She's right. From the beginning to the end of this film, Batman he can't leave Gotham. Like, he's a part of Gotham. Yeah. So, anyways, with all that being said, I'm going to probably give it an. See, originally before going into this, I had 8.7 out of 10 in my head. But I think the more I think about this movie, the more I'm getting more comfortable with the length of the movie, but I do feel like it still bothers me kind of, because I do think this movie, considering if they want to do everything possible, or like almost everything possible, if that's what Matt Reeves is going for with this trilogy, then I'll give it like a 9.4, 9.3. But if it's something that I feel like it's just this movie, you're trying to put a lot of groundwork into it, I kind of want to give it an 8.8. I don't know. Like, I feel like if you're going to carry on with this, then I'll probably look back at this movie and give it a 9.3. But for now, my first impressions of just the movie on its own, I'd give it like an 8.8. I said 8.7. I'll make it an 8.8. It's a really good rating. It's a really good rating. I don't know, man. That movie is so long. It's so long. And I'm a hardcore Batman fan. I love Batman. He's one of my favorite fictional characters, let alone my favorite superhero. So I was more than happy to see that much. It's just, even for me, I was like, does it need to be this long? Some parts I was like, And they got very cinematic with parts. Very like, oh, this is a good clip, Like it's a really good scene, like not clip, but scene. Yeah. But anyways, with that being said, tell me what you thought about the. Oh well, actually, you can't. How would I phrase this? Tell me what you're excited about going into this movie. Although you might see, I'm gonna try and give some heavy warnings to anyone that is watching this and watching the spoiler part and has seen the movie. Don't spoil it down. Don't spoil anything down in the comments. If you've seen the movie, that's great. I hope you enjoyed it. But tell me what you'd put it down, like in your rating down below for those people. Obviously I'll tell you after the spoiler review and everything. But for any of you guys that are going into this, what are you most excited for going into this? For the non-spoiler people, what are you really looking forward to going into this movie? It'll make me really interested knowing after seeing this movie, if that, seeing what people want, and then me knowing like, I wonder if you'll get that or not. And if this review helped you get excited at all, because I think personally, I love this movie, man. I love the crap out of this movie. I feel like this movie is, because you got to be fair in terms of the period. I feel like The Dark Knight is really, really good, but I think this movie proves to me that maybe The Dark Knight isn't gonna age as well as I thought, because this movie did a lot of things that was like, ooh, like we're talking cinema. If we're talking cinema, yeah, this movie did some things that was like, ooh, yeah, a Batman movie can do this now. In terms of just depicting Batman. So I was like, yeah, The Dark Knight, at least in terms of Batman, not aging well. So I don't know. But am I saying this is better than The Dark Knight? I don't know. It takes time, right? This is first impressions. But yeah, anyways, guys, I'm going to jump into the spoiler part. If you're non-spoiler, I hope you enjoy the movie. It was a blast. I loved it. I watched it in IMAX, so I saw the full thing, the full picture. It was great. I really hope you enjoy it, and I hope you come back for the spoiler review so we can have fun chatting about it. See ya. Okay, so for anyone that stayed, that movie was great, dude. I'm not going to touch on anything generally that I mentioned before, but there are some things that are rolling through my head. I'm going to start from beginning to end, and we'll just kind of run through it. And I'm going to just kind of like chop my way through and not really go into like, what I think about the film overall, because you heard my rating and you heard my like vague thoughts. Anyways, okay, spoiler review time. Okay. I think in the beginning, overall, I covered kind of well. I don't think we need to dive into that too much. I did really like the shadows and how he kind of, how criminals, because he's 2 years in. I didn't want to say that, because some people were thinking, oh, this is year one Batman. It isn't year one Batman, but it kind of is year one Batman. So I thought I'd just leave it be. But 2 years is a good amount of time. I felt like I was like, oh, okay, this is fine. From there, I was kind of a little confused because it was interesting to me, and I didn't know if I should touch on this in the non-spoiler part, but I decided not to. It was really interesting to me how they used Batman, like how, when I said Bruce Wayne's not really Bruce Wayne at the beginning, it's because he's on a bike most of the time, and he's technically Batman, but not really. You know what I mean? Like when he has the eye makeup on and he's driving on his bike all the time from location to location. I thought it was really interesting. They didn't ever stop with that, by the way, because when he's raiding, I'm getting way ahead of myself, but when he was raiding the Falcone area to stop Selina, he's still got the bag and everything. Like he looks nothing like what I ever expected. And I think Matt Reeves knew that he had to make Bruce Wayne not Bruce Wayne for him to get away with that, because he's a secluse. He doesn't ever go out, so most people can't recognize Bruce Wayne. Even when he is dressed as Bruce Wayne, it takes a while. Like even Falcone and the Penguin and every other citizen, they just look at him and are like, wait, do I know you? So I thought it was an interesting play on Matt Reeves' part to use that. I guess it makes sense. And that's why I said it feels kind of real. It feels more realistic because it's like he does disappear a few times, but it's a weird, it's like a, you see the behind the scenes. I don't know, it's interesting. Outside of that, I did think it was really creepy the way he was acting with Selena. It, not that it made me think he was a creep, but it was just, it made me realize he's awkward. He's really awkward when he got her by the chin. It was like, look at me, and he's like, it looks good. I was like, it didn't feel like billionaire playboy. It felt more like awkward guy that doesn't talk to women very often, or people. The Also, I think the reason why I thought that is because in the beginning, before that, we see he's looking at the footage of. Well, actually, I know this is after. He's looking at the footage over and over again, and I didn't think of it too much. I was like, it's okay. He watches Selena like pretty. It's like he has feelings for her, but he doesn't know how to talk about it, which, I mean, it makes sense. It makes sense. That's why I say he feels kind of real, and I thought the dynamic between them was funny because it made me realize Bruce is kind of a little bit of a weirdo, but he gets out of his shell. I'm sure he'll get out of his shell, and they'll explore the philanthropist side, which is something this movie really pushed on. They try to make him, like, hey, you got to be a philanthropist, buddy, because we all say, oh, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist, but it seems kind of like cliche, and this movie does an interesting way of making Bruce Wayne interesting because it's like, hey, he needs to be a philanthropist because that's kind of what Gotham needed. They all just look at him as a rich douchebag, which is kind of what he was because he didn't care about Wayne Industries and he saw it as not making a change, which I kind of understand because it's like, why would I talk to my accountant? How does that make an impact? This makes an impact. It's like, I get Batman makes an impact, but then you see with the poor and everything, and when Riddler says it himself, he's like, I'm an orphan. Do you know what an orphan is? Like, Bruce Wayne, he's rich. We're talking about the rich orphan, not the real orphans, That was an interesting dilemma for Bruce. Another dilemma is how people in Gotham act now that Batman is a thing. That goes for Riddler's followers, the 507. I paid attention. The 507 of them that showed up at the garden, the arena, where they were, shooting, and then they're like, "Who are you?" He's like, "I'm Vengeance." He pulled the Batman on him, and I really liked seeing, from right at that point, his tone changed. It changed dramatically. Batman went from vengeance, darkness, scary to hopeful. Very, very, very hopeful. Like, he jumped in, helped them, started a flare, was helping the rescue team and everything. Before that, he was yelling at cops and saying, like, "You're a dirty cop." It's like, is this the same guy? And I mean, it makes sense because after his whole parent part, which I'm jumping all over the place, but I feel like this is just how I'm naturally going to say everything. After his whole thing with Falcone, I think that was an interesting spiral. That was a really interesting spiral that, like, for both Bruce Wayne, I don't know about Batman. I think for Batman it was more of a question after when Bruce realizes what his dad was like, what his mom was like, and how Falcone, really the guy who could have been responsible for his parents' death, ended up just dying. And then, kind of seeing that maybe what is the point of Batman, because he tells Alfred, he's like, "Why didn't you tell me this before I started my whole," he didn't say it, but I wanted him to say my whole crusade, I was like, please say crusade. He didn't say it, but yeah, it made sense to in my head. I was like, yeah, why didn't you say much, and Alfred's, he didn't argue back, but I think his way of explaining it was because he thought that they were still good people and they weren't actually bad, and that doesn't, de-justify Batman. He thought that it wouldn't have made much of a difference because in his eyes, that what Falcone said isn't really true about the Waynes. But yeah, so that kind of changes. I think Bruce becomes a lot more flexible with how he wants Batman to be, and that leaves him open when he realizes, like when he hears like I'm vengeance. He's like, oh, I've been causing a problem. He's like, I'm creating sociopathic revenge seekers like the Riddler. And I think that makes sense because when Edward says, when he says to Bruce, well, he says to Batman that, he's like, I didn't have the raw strength, but like you're the same as me, but you have the raw strength, which also confused me. Did he not figure out that Bruce was Batman? Because I thought that's what he realized when he was looking at all the posters, you know? I thought he realized that, this like who is Bruce Wayne, who is Batman, like he had a question mark on Bruce but he didn't mention anything and from what I can tell, no one else picked up on the whole spreadsheet. like I thought someone in the police force or whatever was gonna notice it, but no, no one. No one said anything. There was a moment where Edward said Bruce, and then he changed the whole thing to Bruce Wayne is a dick. He makes orphans. He spins the image. He's not really like the rest of the orphans. And then it's like, at that point, I kind of was thinking, so are we not in trouble? Like, is his identity safe? Like, what does this mean? So we didn't touch on that. I think we're okay. I'm not too sure. We're gonna have to see. What else? Selina left. She went to Bloodhaven, which is a nice name drop, but I think she'll be back. Penguin. There was an interesting thing with the riddles. I really liked them. I liked the riddles. I thought the riddles were fun. I didn't want to talk about them because obviously it's spoilers, but I don't think there was really much to talk about. They were all kind of fun. Nothing really to explore there. I think they were done in kind of a Riddler way. Also, Riddler in a way won, but he lost, which I liked. I liked the fact that he did flood the city, which was his plan, but he didn't kill everyone and make everyone hate each other and feel hopeless, like they're in hell. It's a loss on his part, but kind of a victory, which I like because it gives him an impact. It's like he did do something. Falcone being dead and the twist on Falcone being Selina's father was interesting. I really like it because I feel like we're gonna talk about it. That's why I feel like Selina's gonna come back. And I don't know. I don't think it's gonna be the next film. It might be the film after that. I'm not too sure. But Selina will definitely come back, and I'll be really excited because I think Bruce has to reveal his identity at some point to Selina, or maybe he won't. But I really feel like that opportunity, it's so good because it's her dad that could have been responsible for killing Bruce's parents. So it's an interesting dynamic. Maybe it's something they'll just leave alone. I do think though that this Catwoman was so good. It was so good. I'm really hoping we see her again. So that's why I'm kind of hoping for myself that she comes back. What else? There's not really much to talk about Alfred. I think we didn't really get to see him after the whole hospital incident, which makes sense. I feel like the way they ended the movie kind of made sense considering all things. Like, you didn't have to have, like, him show up to Alfred and, like, have, like, oh, we're all good now. It's like, he had a busy, busy week, all right? Like, a very, very busy week. I think at the end of the movie, it's November 5th, and the movie starts on Halloween. So that was almost a week, a whole thing happens in a week. The chase with the Batmobile was amazing. I know I'm jumping all over, but the chase with the Batmobile was incredible. I love that. The introduction to the Batmobile was insane. The engine I like the fact that you just see, it's almost like a monster, like it's like an animal. Like the way it was looking at Penguin and Penguin was looking at the car and was like, God damn, Cobblepot was fun. I liked Martinez. I think that was his name. The cop. He was really, really fun. I really liked him. I was so nervous he was gonna die because he felt like he would have, but he's alive. I don't know if he'll stay alive the whole trilogy. I don't think so, but he was really fun. I liked him as a cop. He was super fun. I also like the way he treats Batman a little differently. Well, not differently, but it happened slowly. One little touch I don't think a lot of people would care to notice, but I did really like when Batman was hanging from the stand. It said "real change" on the electrical like billboard, and it's him hanging while he's trying to save all these people, which I thought was really nice. And then the last thing to touch on, because I don't think there's anything else to really touch on. I touched on Falcone a little bit. I liked the fight in the club. The club was intense. I did like the fact that Batman didn't really like fly around and do crazy things. Like he was just brawling. He was brawling. So that was fun. But I think the last thing to touch on. Oh, and the twins. The twins were so fun. The twins were so fun. That's the scene I was talking about. Like every time he shows up with the twins, it's like the first time, the first time he's Batman, he beats him up. The second time he's Bruce Wayne and he's crying, not crying, but he's like super sad and like whatever kid, like they just let him through. And then the third time he sneaks his way through, chasing after Catwoman, and their dynamic was super fun. I did like the fact that there's not really a whole lot to talk about. I just like the way it was done. Nothing spoilery really, like no scenes in particular. I just, like I said, at the beginning was the funnest part because it showed that Bruce is awkward. By the end of it, it just felt like Catwoman and Batman, Selina and Batman, not really Bruce. But yeah, the last thing, the very, very last thing to talk about is the Joker. Yeah, so that was something I knew was gonna happen because one of my buddies from work told me that they casted the Joker already. So I was like, oh. So I was waiting. I heard someone in my audience say, "Oh, it's Two-Face." Yeah, no, because it was when they saw the face. He's disfigured, which is interesting. I think it makes sense. I thought about it on the way back. It's probably because of Ace Chemicals. Like, it makes sense that he's not like fair skin pale. Like he would be burned pale because he fell in acid, right? I didn't get a proper look at him. I mean, I don't think most of us did, but yeah, he sounds young. I mean, the actor is young. It's if you don't know who the actor is, it's the guy who plays. If you've seen Eternals, if you haven't, I don't blame you. It's kind of boring. Personally, not one of my favorite Marvel films, but the Eternals. One of the guys, I forgot what he does. I forgot his power, but he has like short hair and looks kind of thin and pale. Sounds like the Joker, but yeah, he's playing the Joker from what I understand. It seemed fun. I liked actually, ironically, his riddle. Excuse me, his riddle was my favorite riddle. So I was like, how are you gonna steal Riddler's one shtick? But I did like the fact that they laughed together, which was fun. Arkham feels different. It feels kind of congested, but I guess that makes sense. But yeah, he sounds young. He sounds really young because when he was laughing, he sounded like a regular dude, kind of, but like a young dude, which is different. I think I'm not sure if we're gonna see him in the next film. I think we might because my theory was we might see him as because Bruce is going to try to be more of a philanthropist and he's going to try to make Batman like how in the end of the film he wanted him to be hope, not vengeance. He's going to try to make Batman a more hopeful symbol. I think if you have Joker in the next film or even in the third film, either one he'll show up. It would make it a perfect challenge for Batman, like to see like because it's the reverse of what Joker wants. Joker wants Batman to not be hope. He wants Batman to be vengeance. Like he wants Batman to like beat him up and hate me. Corrupt. I want you to be corrupted. So it's a different. It's like an opposite like pathway. So I think it's really interesting that after we got a very hopeful Batman, he saves, he helps the rescue team with the civilians, and he looks up at the airplane. Right after that scene, you get the Joker. So it's like, oh, that might be a little tough. You're like, hopeful Batman. And then you're like, and there it goes. Hopeful Batman's not going to last very long. Yeah, it was a very Superman kind of talk. I don't know how I feel about the narrating he does. The narrating he does feels a little, I don't know if it's because of the voice. I like the Batman voice. I don't know how I feel about him narrating over things. It feels kind of old Western Clint Eastwood kind of stuff. I don't know if that was because of the soundtrack. It might be because of the soundtrack. Personally, it wasn't my thing. It wasn't really my thing, but I rolled with it. I rolled with it. But yeah, I'm not. I don't think there's really much else to talk about with the Joker. He's there. He's there. It's just very interesting look. I didn't expect him to be that young in terms of his voice. His voice is, I'm fine with it. I mean, some people may be like, he sounds like the Joker, and it's like, why is he all disfigured? Oh, it's Two-Face. You know, it's like, you know, I'm sure it's a very confusing iteration for a lot of people, but we'll see what they do with it. You know, so I'm excited. That might have been the last thing I wanted to leave off on. I think it makes sense because it's the Joker. I wanted to leave off with the Joker, if anything. But yeah, I think that's the spoiler review, guys. Again, tell me when you rate the movie. You know, I'd said before in the non-spoiler, tell me your thoughts. You guys can do that in terms of what you were excited about for the movie. Do not say any spoilers. Please, don't say any spoilers. Don't talk about like a scene specifically. Don't go into detail on that. You know, just tell me what your expectations were, and you can kind of explain like, okay, I rated the movie this, came out pleased, came out underwhelmed, you know, what's your thoughts? And do you think your thoughts align with my thoughts? Because I'm pretty interested in that. I want to see if you guys feel the same way I felt about the movie, because I loved it. Like I said, it was a long ride, but I think it's a movie I could definitely always play in the background and watch again and again and be like, man, this is good. Because like I said, it feels like phases. Like you had phase one, which is like introducing the Riddler and Catwoman, and like having a little bit of a Catwoman phase. And then you had phase two, which felt like kind of like a more Penguin thing. Like it felt like kind of a Penguin stuff, which was very short, but it felt like it was long enough where Penguin was really involved. And then phase three was like Falcone, and then phase four was the final, like, let's finish off with the Riddler and get it done. That's what it felt like to me personally. I mean, maybe I know some of you might not agree with that whole Penguin part, but I just got really invested when the whole chase was happening and the drug deals, and like, is Penguin the rat, you know? And it's like, oh, Penguin's not the rat, Falcone's the rat. But it's like, wait, Falcone's not the rat, Falcone's the guy, you know? Like, but he's like the kingpin. So it was interesting. But yeah, if you guys really like this reaction and you like any of not reaction, I'm sorry, that's by habit. If you guys really like this review and my initial thoughts and this kind of stuff and anything Batman comic book related stuff, please feel free to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you can get notified when more videos that come out, and you can support more Batman comic book, different content like this. With that being said, you guys, I've talked more than long enough. At least it didn't reach an hour. It was almost there, but cut it a little short, which is great. I think I did a pretty good job. But yeah, I'll see you guys in my next video. Take care, peace, and goodbye.